the soul I'm experiencing isn't feminine or masculine, or even like as Jung would propose that we have this inner anima and animus. It's more this hermaphroditic extreme that is expressed partially in form. But my journey right now is to embody that hermaphroditic soul more and more in the flesh.
I mean, one of the other just beautiful experiences I had was this idea of like an inner marriage, right? Like this idea that there are aspects internally to ourselves, masculine, feminine aspects, that when we spend a lot of time kind of scanning the world around us to find others to help feel whole, right? And if we can, in these kind of deeper shamanic ways, take the focus out of the external world to have people kind of fill the hole in ourselves, and we can actually bring those parts of ourselves together in communion. My goodness, how deep, how much more deep we can live, and how much more fulfilled we can live. I'm wondering if you might just say a word or two about this idea of like inner marriage and communion with oneself.
It's one of my favorite explorations, because it points to how we're always in relationship, with everything all the time. Like that's part of being in the web of life, but it's also inside. We've heard this as above, so below. It's like as inside, it's also manifests outside. And so, what
Mm.
I want to point at is whatever relationship you have to, say it's the opposite gender, it's a reflection of how you are with your inner opposite of what that relationship is. So if you want to have a strong, passionate, intense, like connection with the opposite sex, you need to have that inside as well in order to, to sustain it on the outside.
Yeah.
And that's independent of, your uh, orientation or your gender identity. It's really, just these primal forces and attractions and polarities that we have.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. I know so one of your books that I just love is Sex Shamans, right? And it's this kind of collection of just wild stories. It's very much in the spirit of this show, which is crazy wisdom, right? These just wild places we find ourselves in our journey towards claiming lost parts of ourselves. And you've edited this book and just grabbed some of the like most amazing,
Mhm.
beautiful stories from people. So yeah, loved the book. Highly recommend it.
Great.
And um, as part of that, we got, you write about your own journey and your own journey about this idea of like really um, pulling in lost parts of yourself in this really unique and different way. And I'm wondering if you wouldn't mind sharing with this community a little bit about your journey to wholeness around, some parts of yourself that maybe were left in the past, and how that informs how you identify today.
Yeah, it's it's like where to start. The I think we were just talking about the inner marriage, and I will say that my journey has recently been really rich around gender. And
Mm.
I'd say recently because I mean it's an ongoing evolution. So I wrote the book, uh, and this is one of the burdens of memoir like stories is that we're the creators of our own reality, which is constantly evolving. So the book is based on the question of like, wow, what tell me about your sexual awakening. Like how did you become who you are? And I'm like, great, let me tell you this, like through being a lesbian, how I woke up to being beyond any kind of gender labels and being the life force itself. And then when I tell my story, I don't want people to think, well, that's the way. So I'm going to tell 19 other stories of sex shamans because then we see how unique that journey is for everybody, which gives permission to you to be totally, on
Mhm.
your journey. But then these 19 other sex shamans are also in the hot frothy edge of evolving. So it's
Yeah.
just really a snapshot of this is that point in their life when they really woke up, to who they are and what they're here for. but that's still an ongoing unfolding. My unfolding recently, I just want to name, is uh, way beyond gender identification and politics around identity. It's around the soul's journey, like
Mm,
the soul I'm experiencing isn't feminine or masculine, or even like as Jung would propose that we have this inner feminine and outer, like i- in inner anima and animus. It's more this hermaphroditic extreme that is expressed partially in form. Um, but my journey right now is to embody that hermaphroditic soul more and more in the
mm,
flesh.
beautiful. And what does that look like? I'm just curious for you embodying a hermaphroditic soul.
Mhm.
What is that day to day kind of in your deepest expression of your of who you are? What does that look like for you?
It's interesting because it looks like me listening to what I've always felt as me. I just couldn't access before as much. So it's like just becoming more and more myself.
Hmm.
Now, specifically, I mentioned, I identified as a lesbian prior to my awakening. I was,
Hmm.
I had 7 years deep relationships with women, and during that time, I thought, oh, who I am is this, and it expresses with women in this way. Um, but that just was a partial experience that was also informed and hijacked by hormones. Because hormones,
Hmm.
are like these physical lenses through which we're seeing the world. And now that I'm pansexual and I'm, in this open marriage of 20 years, I'm able to explore, well, what's the truth of my hormone journey, even? I'm in perimenopause. And starting to microdose really testosterone and feeling the frequencies that come with a daily dose of testosterone that allow me to feel more and more myself, which
Mm.
is to say, I'm seeing the world through lenses that I couldn't access when I was just in the in the cascade of female chemicals.
Wow, wild. And so this is coming from a place in you of like realizing that there's a fuller expression that hasn't yet arrived in you, or there's like a gap between who you've been and who you're becoming. I'm just curious that impulse to like be more fully expressed. What's that? How does that occur for you?
Yeah, it's a really great question because I know a lot of non-binary and trans people who, and it's beautiful to identify. It's like, oh, I don't
Mm,
feel like myself and I'm in pain, and I have what's called dysphoria
mhm,
around not feeling like I can inhabit, for example, uh, a biocock. If I'm a female
mhm,
spirit and I'm in a male body, like this penis doesn't feel like it's mine, and that's really uncomfortable. And so, like, what's motivating that journey sometimes is like to create more congruence in the body. And so,
mm,
I want to really acknowledge, like, dysphoria is a good sign that, oh, I'm not fully inhabiting my body and being myself. Um, I don't have dysphoria, in the same way. There are
mhm,
times, there are aspects. I think all you don't have to be trans to have dysphoria to be like, hey, this big belly doesn't go on this body, or like, where are these
mhm.
wrinkles coming from? Or like a lot of
Mhm.
people look in
Yeah.
the mirror and they're like, what I see in the mirror doesn't match my sense of self.
Mhm.
Um, but I will say that my journey's not coming. My exploration is coming more from a sense of like, how can I be most aligned with my potential?
Mm,
And I genuinely feel that we all have these extraordinary potentials that are actually bigger than 3D. Like, who you are doesn't fully fit in your
mhm,
physical form, and how you access that totality of who you are, um, like, what are the practices? What are the even the foods? What are the routines that help you access the highest template of self? And
Mm.
in a way, it kind of takes the shamanism into biohacking. Like,
Yeah.
okay, well, what, um, how do you become the optimal self?
Yeah.
That's the journey I'm pursuing, and what I recognized was like, oh, I'm wanting I couldn't access the frequencies of my masculine self as well without the testosterone.
Mm. Yeah. Well, I think we can all like this. I think it's just like a very common human experience of feeling like kind of boxed in by cultural norms and even like gender and orientation. There's a way in which it's very limiting for most humans, I think, in some way. And I just have mad respect for people that like yourself that are just like really kind of in a place of exploration and kind of pioneering ways to bend that and to biohack it